Thank you, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon where you are. We're happy to welcome you here to this webinar. Joining me is Neil Blaugrave, who is a principal product manager and one of the people responsible for our strategy in dealing with MLC cost management. So what we'd like to do today is share some thoughts about MLC cost drivers and managing MLC, and in particular to share with you an understanding of the new release of Cost Analyzer that introduced the ability to do MLC budget forecasting, tracking, and reporting. And Neil will be showing you those capabilities as we get into the webinar. If you have questions, you can share those questions on the QA panel, and at the end of the session, we'll look for the questions and provide answers to those questions. Let's begin by talking about the disruptive technologies that everyone is discussing. And whether we're talking about the Internet of Things or the explosive use of all of the data that's available through the application of analytics, or if it's about the way in which we acquire that data from the devices we use, such as wearables, or even if we're looking at the car of the future that's going to be able to drive itself, or perhaps the iCar that Apple's talked about. While everybody focuses on these disruptive technologies, what's really interesting is to think about what is the foundation or the backbone for much of that. So when you use your smartphone to identify your nearest local favorite barista for the morning for your morning drink, what does the mainframe have to do with that? Well, in fact, for many companies, the raw materials are supplied by trucking. And trucking companies such as J.B. Hunt, for example, use mainframes to plan their logistics so that the materials arrive not only on time, but at the least possible cost to try to keep costs down for the provider, and that means keeping the cost down for you. Or for the new generation who say they never go into banks, they take pictures of their checks on their smartphones and deposit them that way and take money out of their accounts by paying for everything with their smartphone. All of those transactions, of course, and the vast majority of banks end up back on mainframes. So the mainframe is a foundational capability that while we talk about all of the disruptions going on, those disruptions ultimately come back to the mainframe. And they do create some disruption for us as we try to manage the mainframe. Every year for the last 9 years, BMC's asked mainframe sites what their issues are in IT. And in asking this for at least the last 5 years, the top concern has been optimizing or reducing the cost of IT. And again, these are mainframe users responding, so this is a mainframe perspective. The number 2 concern is application availability. And so it's not surprising that customers are concerned, number 1, make it cheaper, but make sure it keeps working perfectly. Now, if you look at the graph, you see it's pretty interesting that concerns about big data and mobility, while farther down the list, have actually grown in importance over the last few years. So the mainframe sites are recognizing the impact that has on the use of the system, and they're saying, how do we optimize it? So BMC spent time trying to understand where the costs were and what we can do to help customers optimize those costs. And this provides a picture of the typical view of the mainframe budget. Of course, your mileage will vary, but these percentages are generally true across the broad range of mainframe sites. So the hardware is only about 20% of the mainframe IT budget. People are about a quarter of the cost. That other pie piece over there is for floor space, environmentals, disaster recovery, kind of the catch-all for everything else. And that leaves 45% of the cost being driven by software. Now, the independent software vendors, such as BMC or CompuWare, provide about 10% of the use of that budget. IBM's one-time charge software, which competes with ISV software, is about 5%. And that leaves the big yellow piece. That's the MLC software, or the monthly license charge software. It's the software mainframes have to have, ZOS and DB2 and KIX and IMS and MQ, without which we wouldn't be running mainframes or the applications that we're supporting with them. Those costs are the biggest single cost in the mainframe IT budget. They cost more than the hardware. They cost as much or more than all of the people that are managing the mainframe. Now, the challenge in the MLC software is that the cost mechanism can be fairly complex. And so the way that customers are charged is based on the peak usage during a period each month. Now, some people have the idea that this results in usage-based pricing, but the MLC pricing models are extremely complex. And because of that, you get situations like this. The red dot is the peak, and the peak consumption that will determine the charge for the software. The blue bars at the bottom, the blue area, is the usage of KIX. So you can see that KIX is using about 50 MSUs in this example, but the peak is 323 MSUs. It's the sum of all of the activity, and so CICS is billed based on 323 MSUs. And it's this kind of complexity that's made it really difficult for customers to manage down in a structured way the cost of the MLC software. The BMC decided that this was an area where we could provide help to customers. And we did it with what we refer to as a comprehensive approach to address several different angles of the MLC costs. In the first case, just understanding the MLC cost mechanisms and the cost drivers is difficult to do. So we determined we could help with that. And then being able to plan how changes might change the cost was a second step, and we do that with Cost Analyzer. For those who are using capping or defined capacity, or for those who have been reluctant to use it, we built what we call intelligent capping for zEnterprise. It's designed to dynamically and automatically adjust caps to account for the importance of the work running on the system, so your critical work never gets capped, but you use capping to reduce the total MSUs and reduce your cost. And in the third area, as you run subsystems, such as KIX and DB2, and you have to co-locate any DB2 that you want to communicate to a KIX on the same LPAR, it leads to a proliferation of licensed products across a lot of LPARs. And so we engineered a way to remove the need for some of that proliferation with our subsystem optimizer. So today we're going to focus on the Cost Analyzer piece, the understand and plan, and how to increase the level of cost management that's available to you. Within Cost Analyzer, we start with a report that many of you are probably familiar with, IBM's SCRT report. It's a little bit like your electric bill. For your electric bill, the number of kilowatt hours is recorded by the electric company, and then they send you a bill. And in some electric areas, the rate you pay is different for peak time versus non-peak time. Or if you go over a certain standard set number, you start paying a higher rate for those extra kilowatt hours. The SCRT report is similar, It shows the equivalent of kilowatt hours, the MSUs. It doesn't actually show the cost, though. And so the challenge in managing MLC begins with trying to understand what's going on. And that was the challenge that we picked up with Cost Analyzer. So it's designed to provide the transparency you need. We analyze the system data, we analyze the cost data, and present that in a series of intuitive and interactive graphics, some of which you'll get a chance to see today. And then, unlike your electric bill, we provided a predictive capability. So imagine with your electric bill, if there were an application that the electric company offered where you could say, what if I replaced my inefficient furnace or my inefficient refrigerator, how much money would I save on my monthly electric bill? Or what if I changed when I ran the dishwasher or the washing machine and moved it out of the peak time and away from the peak charges, how much money would I save? That's what we did for MLC management. The ability to ask the predictive what ifs. What if I move work out of peak time? What if I reduce the amount of work being run there? What if I use defined capping? What will happen to my cost? And then the third step we took was to make the MLC information workload aware. So when you get to the point of understanding what's driving costs, you want to know what applications, what work is causing that. And so we developed the ability to show you that. So today, we're moving into the next phase. And one way to think about it is moving MLC cost management from the technical war room into the executive conference room. So we want to talk about the ability to provide budget reporting and management dashboards that deal with the things management cares about. They don't necessarily care about MSUs, but they care about the budget that's impacted by MSUs. So budget variance and forecasting and the cost patterns and how efficient are your efforts to reduce the cost. All of these were capabilities that we're introducing with the new release of Cost Analyzer. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Neil, who will share with you the insights and the operational capabilities of these new features that we've delivered.
Well, thank you, Jay, and good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I've switched over to a live demo, so no more screenshots or slides, but a live demo of CASI 1.2. As Jay mentioned, this is our approach to address the needs of a different stakeholder in IT from the very first version. First version, yes, applied to IT managers and procurement folks, as well as capacity planners and technicians, but this release definitely focused on a more financial aspect and managing to the MLC contract. So this is the landing page that we created, software contract reporting. We built it under the construct of the contract, on the contract, because that seemed to be the most logical way to view this information. We broke up the dashboard into 4 panels, and I'll start with the upper left, and we'll go counterclockwise, and I'll give you a feel for the capabilities that we provided and ways to view the data and the drivers of the peaks and your costs. So I'll expand the first quadrant so you can see it better. So this is basically a representation of the MLC bucket, the MLC budget. Call it a bucket because that's a friendly term to look at it as. And we have, in this case, 2 buckets that we're looking at. This is the green bucket right now is the current spend, where you are current date and time. The green represents that you're under budget, that you're progressing well against plan, and that you're underspending versus plan. The red bucket is actually on the bucket on the left. Now it's red. This is your total MLC budget for the contract term. In this case, we're projecting an increase above and beyond the budgeted, which you have budgeted in your IBM contract. So we've flagged it as red. Now, both of these columns are actually can launch into more details into, again, what's driving those costs. When I click on the green bar, it shows you the primary drivers of cost reduction in your shop. In this case, ZOS and DBQ10 for ZOS are behaving, are actually running under plan for the year over year, quarter over quarter, and month over month. Now, if I go back to the original panel, looking at the red bar, which is actually kind of interesting because you want to know ahead of time that you'll be over budget and possibly into a penalty zone vis-a-vis IBM's contract. And clicking on the red bucket gives me a similar view but in a different sort order, showing me the worst offenders in order. In this case, IMS version 11, year over year, the cost delta is significant, $107,000. I can click on that $107,000 and see at a glance the workloads, the specific workloads that are actually driving that additional cost. And we flag them. You can see a cute little icon being a flag. We can see quickly that system workload on SysM LPAR on the Royal CPC is the one that's driving the most change. Across the top, we have different workload types that you can quickly see, whether it be by service class. So you get a slightly different perspective, the service class view of the workload, the address spaces, looking at whether it be DB2, CICS, that kind of thing, or workloads by importance. We have workloads by WM Policy Manager as well as report class as well. So you can view it this way. You can see again the workloads that are flagged as being the ones that are driving the most cost. But if you want to see everything, you can quickly just select all, and you can see that perspective for all the workloads, all the major deltas that are affecting your cost. And you can change this perspective. This view is the year-over-year view, looking at it for the last 12 months. And you can quickly change that view to last 3 months. And many customers simply want to see what happened versus last month. Their workloads are such that they really only care about the last month, and you can do that as well. So we give you 3 different ways to look at change over time at very specific levels of workloads. You can see at a glance quickly what's driving your cost. And you can always go back to just show me the important stuff, the items that are flagged. Now the second quadrant, cost by billing month, and again I'll expand that so you can see a little easier. This is where we're tracking your actual MLC spend versus budget, what you planned for. The black line represents your budget. Now it's worth just spending a moment here to show you where that black line is and how it's created. So in our administration tools, we have the ability to create a software contract. In this case, the contract that I'm looking at is the one I've been working on. We'll just modify that one so I can show it to you. I'll unlock it so we can make changes to it. And this is where you would define basically the starting point and duration of the contract and your total MLC budget that you've agreed to with IBM in your contract. And then we can edit the period details, since not every period is the same. I know that IBM does send you an Excel spreadsheet after every month. It shows you basically your actual versus plan. It's a linear type of breakdown. But this way you can actually map your planned spend versus your business profiles. So not just a linear divided by 12, but map it to your reality. And you can see here as well, we provide the ability to account for cost changes, cost events during the life of the contract. In this case, the MLC price increase in January 2015. It's as simple as adding that event in the contract, assigning the cost table, the cost coefficients that reflect that increase of X%, and that'll be reflected in the forecast. So now we're looking at the solid bars. These are how you've actually performed in time. So the actual spend versus budget. And clicking on any of these brings you into our monthly summary report. So this is the version 1 view of MLC costs. Many of you are familiar with it. You've seen it and whether in trials or POCs or you have the product. And you can see here again at a glance, drilling into the monthly summary report, seeing which products drove the most cost, and then we want to see the LPARs and the workloads that are driving that cost, your worst offenders. You can see at a glance. The heaviest LPARs. And the workloads, again, that are driving that work. Well, let's go back to the software contract. An interesting thing that we do here, and this is unique to our product, understanding what your spend will be in the future, forecasting from your actual spend to your future spend. In this case, the stripe columns represent your forecast. Now, some shops will do just a general linear trend on Excel, and that's okay if your work is very predictable or you've done it before and your finance folks are okay with that. But typically they're not. They'll want something a little bit more sophisticated than that, a little bit more aware of your workloads, your growth, and how do you do that? So we do that for you automatically. We'll look at the data that we've collected thus far. So we have here 10 plus months of data that we've collected. We'll detect the shifts automatically. We'll break up the days into shifts based on the workload profiles, and we'll factor in statistically the growth that we're observing over time, and that's a linear fit. And then we'll look at the variability in that growth, the variability in that workload, from month to month, from shift to shift, and we use that to adjust the forecast, and that's how we build it out into the future. So each of these striped lines, you can click on it to actually see a similar view as I showed you from the actual data, but now it's the forecasted or projected data. So you can see very quickly again as what we're basing our forecast on. So you can do a sanity check. Does it make sense? And if I'm looking at IMS version 13, for example, I can click on the spark line to see the LPARs that are running IMS, and only the LPARs that are running IMS. I can sort on the weight to see the heaviest LPARs, and again I can see how they're contributing to the peak, when the peak will be, and how heavy or how high the peak will be. Now we go to one layer of granularity lower than this. Even though we do look at the workloads to drive the forecast, we stop at showing you the actual individual workloads. That might be a little bit arrogant on our part, to be honest. But we do show you the LPAR view, and do show you the peaks and valleys, and showing you the FOIA rolling average versus the MSUs. You can see at a glance which LPARs are being forecasted to drive the most cost, the most growth, and also understanding where we're observing during the week, during the month, where those peaks will be. So I'll go back to the software contract reporting here. So we can shift these views. Right now I've got it looking at it from a single period for the entire contract, but we can change that view to a stacked period view. So now you can see it month over month for the three-year contract. You can see it year over year as well. And we can group them by like month together. So giving you different views of how to look at your MLC costs by billing month over time. Now, one additional spin that we have on this view is looking at the aggregate view of your costs, so you can see it building up over time. The third quadrant, cost variance by billing month. At a glance, understanding and seeing how you're performing against budget again. So these first three quadrants really are to map actual versus plan, and seeing at a glance whether you're in good shape or not. Green, as always, in our Cost Analyzer product from version 1, means you're below budget. Red being you're over budget. In this case, your variance against plan. You can see at a glance that this period of your cycle, you're overspending. You're making up for it subsequent months. but the forecast is predicting that you will consistently overspend. You may catch up at the end, but the grand total is you will bust your budget. You will bust your allotment with IBM and fall into the penalty zone. Now we can change this view and look at it from your MLC products and how they're contributing to cost. So again, if you want to see KICS, DB2, IMS and their contribution, or see them all over time, and seeing how they're apportioned over time and how they're contributing to your overall bill. Now the last quadrant that we built out is actually a management index. It's a, well, let's call it an MLC reduction index. It's a measurement of how well you're doing as far as optimizing your MLC spend. It won't necessarily say decrease. I'd like to use the word optimize because you want to get the right, you want to spend the right amount of money and get the right amount of performance, the right amount of availability. Availability is always king. We know that. Performance is always king. We know that. It trumps cost reduction almost every time. So there's a balance there. So let's call it optimizing your cost. Now in this case, it's a ratio of your total average MSUs used across your CPCs versus your peak forward rolling average. It's a ratio. And the closer to one you are, the gold line, represents how well you are doing at smoothing out your peaks. So one of the goals of MLC cost reduction is to smooth out the peaks, balance your workloads, to have fewer peaky periods and with deep valleys, but more of a smoother spark line, if you will. Now this can measure your progress over time as you're working through the MLC reduction activities, how well you're progressing. So the closer you are to one, the better you're doing. And you can see here where there was steady growth in respect of you've done a great job of optimizing your workloads, optimizing your spend, and then we had a dip. And do we need to dig into that dip to see what went wrong, what we did differently, what happened differently? And again, they'll launch you directly into monthly reporting so you can dig into the details like we did before. Now, if you want to look at how this ratio is built out, you can see here's your peak forward rolling average by CPC for the entire reporting period, including the forecast. And you can change that view to look at the average monthly MSU used by CPC, and then show you each CPC individually. So trending towards that magic number of 1. So when you combine these two CPCs, you get your ratio. So what I've tried to show you here is essentially a better and a new way to look at MLC cost from a budget perspective, or a contract perspective. This is all built and kept current every day as we process and load the SNF data into our database to build out the monthly summary charts that are updated every day. This information is also used at the same time to update these charts. So the actual spend as each month clicks off, these charts will be updated, and you can drill down into any specific day, and you can see these charts as they morph over time. So with that, I think I've given you a good introduction to CASI 1.2. I will close by noting that while this was the main thrust of our new release, we did spend a lot of time still on usability and optimizing the workflows within the tool, even though we delivered what was truly and what customers told us was a state-of-the-art interface, easy to use, intuitive, very friendly tool. So it demystified the complexity of MLC costs, and it gave, I believe, our market, our fellow mainframers, a better understanding of MLC and how it affects them, what it truly means, demystified the whole area, the whole discipline, yet did it in a very user-friendly way. And we took it to heart that we were on the right path. A friendly tool, an easy-to-use tool is what IT wants. Doesn't mean it's a stupid tool, doesn't mean it's a simplistic tool, but if it can demystify a very complex area, but make it easy to understand, make it easy to navigate, let you do the what-if planning, truly understand if I do a change to the environment, what are the cost implications? Is it worth doing? Do we really save enough money versus the performance risk or the availability risk? Or is it a good trade-off to make? So, so we've even improved upon that usability of those workflows and made it even cleaner, smoother, faster, and again, even more intuitive than it was before. So kudos to our development team. They've taken a very good product and actually made it even better. So with that, I'll stop marketing and I'll turn it back over to Jay.
Thank you, Neil. Neil, actually, we have a question. I don't know whether it was spurred by your comment or not. It says, you mentioned predicting the change impact. How does Cost Analyzer actually do that? Is that something you could show us?
I could show quickly if you flick it back to me.
Yeah. So if we'll return control to Neil.
Okay. And I'll go back to sharing my my desktop. Okay. In our planning tool, so I'm on the fly here, so I don't have a set script here. So I'll create a plan, and we'll work on a given month that we have data for. And again, I'm on the fly here, so we'll take it by workloads by importance. You can see here that we have all the workloads that we support in the product today. So you can choose any of the workloads to build your plan against. In this case, I'll do workloads by importance, and I'll do a simple capping example. I've got all the CPCs here already checked off. I'll focus on two of the CPCs where I've got some data that I like to work with. So now we'll build out the plan. This will just take a second. Now there's a couple of LPARs that I like to play with from a capping perspective in my test bed, and I'll pick DD2B. It happens to be an LPAR with a lot of low importance work. And you can see it here. Now I'm going to click on this button and give myself some more real estate so you can see it better. This is our planning tool, basic interface, and from this platform, we can move workloads, we can delete them, and we can change their profile by decreasing them or increasing them, so to represent growth or represent decline in the workload. And we can also set a defined capacity, just an LPAR defined capacity. So in this case, I'll set the defined capacity to I'll say 1,000. Just to trim off the peaks, and then I'll apply the change. So now what it's doing under the covers of evaluating the plan, and I'll say no. It's applying a defined capacity. You can see here. I'll pop out this chart so you can see it more. It's set the defined capacity to 1,000. And you can see here that it, yes, as it should, it clipped off the peaks. So now what it's done under the covers, we look at the workloads that are running during each of these capped intervals, and we do like WLM would do. We start throttling back, start delaying work, starting with the low importance work first and working up the ladder. So in this case, that's what we did. We delayed that work. And you can see that the peaks have been flattened, the work has been widened, and actually the 4-hour rolling average changed location, changed time and date. And that's us looking at it from first the LPAR perspective, but then holistically across the entire CPC, because each LPAR is contributing in its own way to the cost of each MLC product, or most of the MLC products, depending on the software stack. So when that LPAR changes, its contribution changes, so it may affect the overall peak or rolling average, the CPC peak, and it may affect the cost for multiple products. And to see how that manifests itself in a report, and this gets to the, I think, to the answer to the question. You can see here that we have looked at this particular change across multiple products, since multiple products can be affected depending on what's running on each LPAR and each particular software stack. In this case, setting the cap on that LPAR would result in potentially $11,000 per month savings, so $132,000 per year. So it gives you a feel for the cost impact of a change. And you can do the same kind of thing with software moves. You can move MLC products from one LPAR to another. You can consolidate MLC products. If you're running, for example, IMS on 2 or more LPARs and they're using a very, very small footprint, it's an option to consolidate. And you can do that with Cost Analyzer. You can take those IMS subsystems, consolidate them down to 2 LPARs, for example, or 1 if we're talking about test LPARs and not worried about availability or redundancy, and recoup the savings, the incredible amount of savings that can happen just by doing a simple thing like that. One thing we all need to keep in mind as the EC12 and now the Z13 that's coming to market shortly have given us so much additional capacity, so much speed, so much throughput, that our designs of the past may not be relevant anymore. They may need to be revisited. We used to do software consolidation and analyses all the time, and we fell out of that habit because we had so much capacity. But now with MLC, it's worth revisiting to recoup those savings, and actually they can be significant, and Cost Analyzer can help show that.
Okay, thank you, Neil. I think that addressed the question, but and thank you all for the question. I'm reflecting on my days as a capacity planner, and I know tracking actual versus plan was almost a holy grail. And if I had been able to give my senior management a set of reports like you showed on the management dashboard that simply projected, here's when we're going to run in trouble with our budget, and then here's what we can do about it, that would have been a tremendous value, and wouldn't have hurt the individual doing it as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when we've done some research working with consultants who advise companies on managing MLC, an interesting set of facts came out. One is that for many people, if you're not doing anything about managing MLC, you can be spending 10 to 15% more than average. If you actively manage it, you can spend 10 to 15% less. And the opportunity for savings between those two is 20 to 30%. If you think about your monthly MLC cost, think about saving 20 to 30% and what you could do with that in terms of funding additional efforts either on the mainframe or in your IT transformation. As I noted in the agenda, we want to spend just a couple minutes talking about an announcement that we made last week in terms of a partnership with CompuWare Corporation. Many of you, if you're familiar with CompuWare, you may be familiar with their product Strobe. And when we looked at the things that we do with Cost Analyzer and with our main view monitors and the things that Strobe can do, we saw the opportunity for a partnership that would benefit customers. So Cost Analyzer gave you the ability to understand what the cost drivers are, and eventually you'll get to the question of how do I improve the code in an application that's driving a lot of the peak usage, and that's where Strobe can provide the answer. On the other side of the equation is mean time to repair and keeping things available and avoiding cost, and having the ability to gather deep dive information on the code that may be causing the problem can be challenging because the occurrence of a problem happens, and then by the time you recognize it and you want to go back and get more information, it could be gone. And so we created an integration as well between MainView to let it determine those problem areas and then automatically trigger the more detailed analysis that can be done with Strobe. So you saw a picture such as this with Cost Analyzer. The integration that we're doing allows Cost Analyzer user to say, here's a peak. I need more detail on what's happening in the workload. So I can right mouse click, make a Strobe request for a specific LPAR, and that would be sent to Strobe, and the data that was available could help identify where the code logic or the coding was creating excessive usage and what could be done about it. And then back in Cost Analyzer, you use the what if capability that Neil showed you and be able to project, if I tuned that application code, how much money could I save? So when you think about one of the challenges with tuning application code is knowing whether it's worth the effort, because you have to convince the app dev team or the business owner or the application owner that doing this and making the effort is worthwhile. And with the information provided by the link between Cost Analyzer and Strobe, you'll be in a position to say, is it worth $31,000 a month, as in this case, for us to do that tuning? And with a dollar understanding or a cost understanding, it's a lot easier to get everybody aligned on what work should we do or what work will we not be doing. So we will be at Share next week in Seattle at the BMC booth and at the CompuWare booth. We're doing demonstrations of this integration. We'll be delivering the integration in the July timeframe. And for customers who have Cost Analyzer or customers who have Strobe, the integration will just be a part of their products. So this is not some new component we're marketing. It's simply a way of enabling the two products to work together to give more value to customers who are trying to manage the MLC costs. So if you're coming to Share, come and visit us. If not, you can visit our website, and we've got information on the press release and on the partnership that we're undertaking with CompuWare. So if I were to summarize Cost Analyzer, what we're trying to do is simplify something that's very complex so that you understand where the cost allocations are. You help management manage the budget, and basically the goal is to keep out of trouble. Let's find the trouble spots before they actually occur and take corrective action so that we stay within our budgets and meet our goals. Using the details, it's possible to understand the peaks and understand the workloads that are driving LPAR or CPC peaks. As Neil showed you in the one example, it's really easy to try capping and see what capping is going to do to your cost and what it's doing to the workloads and the spreading out of the activity. And then whether you're looking at moving workloads to a different time period or growing or decreasing workloads or even removing licensed products, you can evaluate what those are going to cost. And the whole goal is let's find that 15 to 20% savings in the MLC costs. You can learn more about this at our MLC cost management page on the web. In addition, there's information on the three pieces of the comprehensive suite that I mentioned: Cost Analyzer, Intelligent Capping, and Subsystem Optimizer. So at this point, I'll turn again and ask if there are questions. You can share those questions on the Q&A panel. I'll give everybody a minute. So one of the questions is, Neil, how do we keep up with different cost models? IBM introduces some new changes to the way MLCs calculated or discounted? How do we keep up with those?
Well, we have a channel communication with IBM that we built up when we started creating Cost Analyzer, and we have mechanisms to be aware of the new price models that are coming. For example, multiplex. We were working with one of the beta customers. There were only 2 or 3 customers worldwide that had multiplex last year. So we were working with them initially to build out some of the initial models, and so they could actually do it within Cost Analyzer. It was a one-off because we didn't know at the time that IBM was going to roll it out to the world. But now that they are, it'll be something that will actually productize within Cost Analyzer. My understanding is multiplex will be available in Q3, for example, starting in Q3. So you can expect support within CASI shortly after that.
Okay, thank you, Neil. Another question is, what's your view of how ICAP compares to AutoSoftCap? That would be a more detailed conversation. We'd be happy to have that. In general, when you look at the ability that Cost Analyzer has and intelligent capping and the ICAP component and the subsystem optimizer, we're doing a range of things for MLC management that we don't believe is available from any other suite. So beyond that, I think we would want to have a more detailed conversation about specifics and understand the areas that you were interested in.
So we have another question, Jay, about Strobe. And if we have BMC's MLC Cost Management Suite, will we get access to CompuWare's Strobe without additional payment?
So unfortunately, we will not be able to do that. The idea was to provide integration for customers who own both. They'll be able to get more benefit from them. For customers who don't have one or the other, this may be an integration that gives more value to the piece they don't have. So if you have Cost Analyzer, and we have customers who said, we've considered Strobe, but we run into the problem of it, we're not sure where to apply it to get the greatest benefit. Well, now having Cost Analyzer to help direct it and make it cost directed may make someone examine what's the value of Strobe and decide that they would want to acquire it. Okay, I don't see any other questions. We thank you for joining us on the webinar. We hope this has provided information that you found valuable. We're excited about taking the mainframe into its next 50 years. One of the ways to do that is to improve the economics of the platform. And as we've shown, as we've talked about, focusing on MLC costs is one of the ways to drive down the cost and make sure that the mainframe is ready to support all the disruptive technologies that seem to be driving more work to the mainframe. So thank you. We appreciate having you here. And if you have more information, please feel free to reach out to us. If you have a need for more information, please feel free to reach out to us.
And thank you. That does conclude today's presentation. Thank you for your participation.